Hi everyone, I wanted to do another video to discuss some issues that have been obviously mentioned in the past, and sometimes revisiting old matters in detail can help us understand their importance. You know, as time moves on, sometimes we forget the detail, and I surprise myself continuously when I go back and look at the documentary and read the transcripts and so on, how some things just keep popping up in my mind. And anyway, I hope this video is helpful in that respect and can reinforce some issues that I think most of us are familiar with. So I've loosely called this little video the impossible timelines. And the reason I've done that hopefully will become evident as we go along, but it's mostly to show that the state's case against Stephen in particular is just too unbelievable to have any credibility at all. But it's one thing to have that opinion, it's another to support it with facts. So I'm going to use some, I think, rather indisputed facts about the day of the 31st of October 2005 to, if you like, shore up my view about the impossible timelines. Now, the first fact, if I'm allowed to call it that, is associated with the afternoon of the 31st of October when Teresa Halbach came to the Avery salvage yard to photograph a car being sold by Barb, but Stephen was managing the sale of that. Now, we know from recorded interviews with Stephen that Teresa arrived sometime between 2 o'clock and 2:30 in the afternoon. And we also know from testimony given by Bobby Dassey, one of Brendan's older brothers, that he also said at 2:30 he saw he saw Teresa drive up and start taking photographs of his mother's car. So Stephen's timeline of 2 to 2:30 and Bobby's in-court evidence of 2:30 would suggest that she arrived at 2:30, and that's fine. Also, Bobby says that he left for hunting at around 2:40 or 2:45 after seeing Teresa going to have a shower and getting ready to go hunting. He left around 2:40 to 2:45. Excuse me. Given the time it takes to, get undressed, have a shower, get dressed again, get yourself organised, and if he left at 2:40 or 2:45, and he said he saw her at 2:30, then it's reasonable to presume that he believes she was at least taking photographs of the car for only about 5 minutes or so, which aligns with Stephen's testimony, or evidence, I should say, that says she was there just for 5 minutes. That's where the stories depart, however. So Stephen says that after taking the photographs and collecting the money for the photographs, she left after 5 minutes, drove down the road, turned left and went out to Highway 147. And that was the last he saw of her. Now, in Bobby's in-court evidence, he says that when he went out to go hunting at 2:40, Teresa's 2:40 or 2:45, in that time frame somewhere, that Teresa's car was still there, but Teresa was nowhere to be seen. Interestingly about that is that he also said when he was looking out at the window at Teresa that he saw her walking towards Stephen's trailer, and in the transcripts for the trial, I think he said he saw her as close as 25 yards from his trailer. Now, that story that Bobby gives contradicts what Stephen says. And in fact, again, another interesting side point, when he was asked those questions about what he saw after he came out of his home to go hunting, Ken Kratz actually asked him those questions rather than, and all he had to do was answer yes or no. He doesn't actually give those answers directly himself. That's a little odd in my opinion, but it to me suggests that the prosecution were in control of the question and the answer. But I could be wrong there, and I'm happy to be wrong. But let's just follow these two forks in the road, if you like. The first being, Stephen says that she left around 2:35. He doesn't actually use that number, but if she's been there 5 minutes or so, you can reasonably assume that she left around 2:35, 2:36, 2:37. And if you follow Stephen's story, she left the property and went on with her business wherever that should be. And on that basis, the state's case against Stephen falls over because she wasn't on the property. Now, if we go to and take the state's case, its arguments in prosecuting Stephen, they say, and we'll follow that through and see how this makes sense time-wise, because this is a discussion about timelines. They say that if you follow Bobby's testimony, that Teresa walked towards Stephen's trailer, got within 25 yards. That had to be, again, around 2:35, 2:36. Why? Because Bobby said he was out of the shower and ready to go hunting at 2:40, 2:45, and he'd seen Teresa before he went and had the shower. He was watching her through the window. He also says, as I said a moment ago, that she left, that when he came out to go hunting, that her car was there, but she was nowhere to be seen. Now, that doesn't directly say that she didn't leave the property. It's just that her car wasn't there at the time he went hunting, and she was nowhere to be seen. Now, it's pretty reasonable to assume, when you look at those two points of view, that they don't align and something's not quite right there. But I'm going to follow the trail, because I explained Stephen's story, because it's fairly quick. She left, therefore she wasn't on the property, and therefore he couldn't have committed the crime in the way the state claimed he did. So if we follow the state's case, she walked towards Stephen's trailer, and you can only assume that in some way during that period, because Bobby didn't see this, he was having a shower, that he lured her into his trailer, his home, his trailer, and somewhere between the hours of 2:40 and I'm going to say 3:40, which is 1 hour, he's committed these horrible acts against Teresa. Restrained her, who knows what he's done to her according to the state, but assaulted her, raped her, who knows what else. Why I say between 2:40 and 3:40, because the next part of the state's story is that Brendan came home on the school bus, and we know that that 3:40 time frame is a reliable time when he would be home, and that Brendan, walked towards Stephen's trailer, allegedly with mail to give to him from the letterbox, and he heard Teresa screaming and so on, and he walked up to the door, and Stephen greeted him, according to the state's argument, sweaty and just in his shorts and so on, and invited Brendan to participate in these awful crimes. Now, let's think about that for a second. So, Stephen has allegedly lured Teresa into the trailer at somewhere around 2:36, 37, 38, somewhere around there, because her car was there when Bobby left for hunting, according to Bobby's testimony. So while Stephen has Teresa in his trailer doing these horrible things to her, Teresa's car must still be sitting outside near Barb's place. I don't think it's likely that he said to Teresa, "Oh, just hang on a minute, I'll be back in a moment, I just got to go and park your car." That seems pretty unlikely. Or even if he took her car and hid it very close by, the land around Stephen's house and Barb's house is very open. There's no way it would logically make sense that he, in his sweaty state, he jumped in the car and drove it somewhere on the property and then walked back while Teresa's still tied up in his bedroom. So to me, that's an impossible timeline. So at 3:40, 1 hour after this alleged event must have started, because the timeline would suggest it must have started that way, given that Bobby didn't see her at all when he went to go hunting, Brendan arrives, and Brendan participates in this event, according to the state. Now, we also know that from evidence given by Barb that is actually also recorded on prison recordings, that Barb came home around 5 o'clock and Brendan was already home. So just think about this. So Brendan's walked over there at, according to the state, at around 20 minutes to 4, 3:40. But within an hour and a little bit, he's back home, calmly sitting on the living room couch or wherever he was, playing video games. Hardly the behaviour or the, if you like, the persona or the mood of someone who's allegedly just participated in rape, cutting people, cutting their hair and sexually assaulting someone, cutting her throat. I mean, and before 5 o'clock, he's back home, according to the state, and by the evidence, playing video games. Because Barb came home and he was there, just doing what Brendan would normally do. How does that make any sense of that timeline? Now, not long, and obviously, you know what? Brendan was smart enough to come home and make sure he was there calmly and without any sense of, worry that he would be home before his mum came. That seems quite remarkable. So let's just say this is still true, and Brendan got home, let's just say 10 to 5, just before Barb got there. So what's happening in the meantime? Where's Teresa's car in all of this? Where is it sitting? Where is her car during all of this? But you know what? Half an hour after that time, let's just leave Brendan at home for the moment, playing video games. Half an hour after that time, Jodie, Stephen's then fiancée, who's in jail for DUI offences, phones Stephen at, well, actually a little more than half an hour, maybe 45 minutes, phones Stephen from jail in a routine call to Stephen, and they have this very lovey-dovey conversation, as two people in love would likely have, and there's nothing in that, and you can listen to that conversation, again recorded, there's nothing in that conversation in Stephen's demeanour or his voice or anything that would indicate that he's just participated with his nephew in some horrific crime, including rape and assault and withholding a woman who's screaming her head off, according to the state. So at 5:36, Stephen's just taking a call from his girlfriend or his fiancée. And the state's case is that eventually, that's when all this crime is going on, and keep in mind, of course, there's no evidence whatsoever that any of that happened in Stephen's trailer, because there's no DNA evidence at all in that trailer associated with Teresa, other than, of course, the magic key. And there's no evidence of DNA of Brendan's at all. There's obviously DNA of Stephen's because he lives in there, but no evidence of DNA of Teresa's or any DNA of Brendan's at all, let alone other physical signs like marks on the bed and, blood on the floor or on wherever blood would go when you'd cut someone and treated them in that way. So no evidence in that sense, but, at 5:36, Jodie calls Stephen and they have this normal lovey-dovey conversation. Hardly the conversation, when you listen to it, that would suggest she's talking to a murderer and this is someone who's a fiancé, right? She knows him. She knows him well. You should listen to that conversation again. It's actually on the docuseries, so it's there for you to make your own assessment. Okay, then we also know about timeline is that at around 7, according to Brendan, and he's consistent in this in many interviews, that Stephen phoned him and asked him did he want to come over to the bonfire and have a bonfire for Halloween, and they took the golf cart around and picked up junk to throw on the bonfire. Well, keep in mind a couple of things, what's gone on in this time frame between when Brendan's gone home. not only have they committed those acts that I tried to describe before, but they've now taken Teresa into the garage, allegedly, and shot her. And they've used her car, Teresa's car, to transport her somehow. Must have done, because how did the blood of Teresa get in the back of her own car? According to, this is the state's case, of course. How did the only way her blood gets into that car is, if Stephen is guilty, is if he and Brendan transport her in that car. Well, she's in Stephen's trailer, I guess from what I can see, probably no more than 10 or 20 yards from his garage, and allegedly they shoot her there. Again, just by the by, no blood evidence at all in the garage, other than, some issues to do with the magic bullet, which popped up 3 or 4 months later, but no evidence. So they brought a car over, or the car, they're either sitting still outside Barb's or somewhere in the property. They brought the car over to Stephen's place, chucked her in the back to take her 20 yards. Ask yourself, does that make any sense? Shoot her in the garage, and if they didn't use the car to take her to the garage, or then they've used the car to take her around the back of the garage. Again, a crazy concept that would be true in terms of the timeline, because Teresa's body, and my apologies to the Halbachs about this, because we're talking about a real person, and it's very difficult to speak of someone like this as an object, and I do apologise for that, but this is just the reality of this circumstance. Teresa is already deceased, according to the state. Her body must already be on that bonfire. Her phone is already in that bonfire. And Stephen, and I presume some rubble on it, and to cover the obvious. And then Stephen and Brendan wander around the yard, pick up tyres and some bench or cupboard or something to throw on to create the bonfire at 7 o'clock and make it a Halloween celebration. Okay, so that's at 7, and Brendan also, in his evidence, in terms of both interviews and other evidence, has said that he went home, he thought around about 9 o'clock, I seem to recall. And again, Jody phoned Stephen again at, I think it's 8:57 p.m. So about an hour and a half. About an hour and a half to 2 hours from when Stephen and Brendan started collecting items for the fire and burning the fire, standing around chatting. Now, when Jody rings Stephen at 8:57, again on the jail phone, which is recorded and you can listen to it, they again just talk about lovey-dovey stuff and proposing and etc. It's very normal conversation, if you like, for two people in love. Again, that conversation is not the conversation of someone who's just brutally been involved in a murder, just having that type of conversation. It just doesn't make sense at all. And where is Teresa's car in all of this? Where is her car between 2:40 and, forget about the following Saturday when they found it, just forget that. Where is her car in this time when he's got her caged up in his own trailer, needing it to be handy to transport her across 10 yards to his garage or behind his garage? Where is that car? Is it hidden down somewhere in the back of the yard, where he has to go many yards, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of yards to retrieve it? Well, is that where it is? Seriously, it just doesn't make any sense at all. The only thing that makes sense, of course, is the car was never there. The only thing that makes sense, of course, is that Brendan was never there at Stephen's trailer and that he never participated in this alleged crime. His behavioural characteristics, the timeline, when his mother saw him, everything was fine. When Jody spoke to Stephen, everything seemed fine. And the story that's been created around this is just impossible to believe. The timelines don't support it. The behavioural aspects don't support it. The only thing that puts any sense of connection between Teresa and being in Stephen's trailer, after she took the photos was Bobby's evidence given saying that he saw her walk, he saw Teresa walk towards Stephen's trailer, and that whilst the car was there at 2:40, 2:45, she wasn't. Now, in fairness to Bobby, he doesn't say she went into the trailer. He doesn't say anything other than he saw Teresa walk towards Stephen's trailer. Now, it's possible that she potentially walked towards and collected some money and then got back into her car a bit later and drove off, although given the structural setup of Barb's house and Stephen's house, it'd be hard to imagine not seeing her. But anyway, I guess that's possible, and she could have still left the property even though Bobby said he saw her walking to the trailer. If we follow Stephen's line that she left, well, then we know Bobby left shortly after Teresa left, probably just a few minutes. There's something not right, as I think we know, about what Bobby has said and what Stephen's evidence is. I'm not saying who's right or who's wrong. I have a view, obviously, but and it seems to me at least that Bobby's testimony is partly what he thinks and partly what he's led to say. Why that might be is speculation. But if you just accept the state's case about what transpired and you interpose with that case the known timelines, that is when Bobby left to go hunting, when Teresa arrived, when Barb came home and saw Brendan just at home doing his normal things, when Stephen called Brendan to come over and participate in the bonfire, when Jody called Stephen at 5:36 and called him again at 8:57, I think the time is. All those things just don't help the story that Stephen committed this crime along with Brendan. When I say help, they don't support the story that has been made by the prosecution. The timelines and behavioural aspects just don't fit. And as I've mentioned earlier, where is Teresa's car in all of this? Given what's going on, allegedly going on with Teresa, where is her car sitting at this time? You know, these are the things that, for me, when you look at the simple facts, just don't align at all. And that's why I come up with the theory, well, not the theory, but if you like, the statement that these are impossible timelines, and the fact that they're impossible timelines gives no credibility to the state's case against Stephen and Brendan, for that matter, at all. Just, they don't at all. Anyway, that's my thoughts just for now. I'm sure people smarter than me are going to bring the truth out in this matter soon enough. Well, probably not soon enough, but soon. And I'm looking forward to the day when the real truth is on the table and both Stephen and Brendan are home with their families. Okay, thank you very much. Bye for now.